Hello.
It says here, temperatures to drop, but not with this podcast, that's for sure.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was a boastful start without actually following it up with what on earth I mean.
Yeah, I don't know where you're going with that one, Charles.
I feel we should start with an interruption because there's a promise of plenty. So let's crack on with an immediate interruption.
We interviewed Oliver Jones, who founded the brilliant Deershed Festival in North
Yes.
Yorkshire about 11 years ago, only a year ago, and he was
Yeah.
he was fairly negative about how hard it was to put on
Yeah.
independent music events.
Mm.
And lo and behold, the great journalist Dave Simpson, who years ago wrote for Melody Maker, but regularly contributes to The Guardian and Uncut Magazine and various music things. He on
Yeah.
Friday did this massive long article, which you read as well, all about how hard it is for live venues now. And he talked to Nathan Clark, who runs the Broodnell Social Club in Leeds, and
Yeah.
Oliver Jones, of course, who runs Deershed, and he talked about the Band on the Wall in Manchester, another great venue. And it's all about how energy bills, inflation, and the audience struggling for money is combined to make running a live venue a very, very difficult thing to do.
One of the ones that struck out in the article was the Moles Club, the famous Moles Club in Bath. 45 years gone. And the last two nights both sold out, and yet on those nights they lost £1,100. And that is a microcosm of what venues are up against. I think one of the examples that was used in the article was that I think Nathan was talking about a gig that had been cancelled at the Broodnell at short notice, and all the costs of that went into that. And there's no way that money could be made back on it. It couldn't get a replacement act. It had been quite required quite a lot of the technical elements for the gig to be involved.
Yeah. That was psychedelic porn trumpets. So I think one of them had got ill or something. It was way beyond their control. Well, yeah, but it's the margins. Britain's become a very difficult place to make money in, unless you're already making big money. Trying to make moderate money is now almost almost impossible.
What the article highlighted, apart from extraordinary that Manchester is about to open yet another venue, 23,000 seater, on top of already having a 21,000 seater, on top of the venue that you featured last year when it opened, Graham. What's the full name of it? The one involving Factory? What's it called?
Aviva Factory International.
Yeah.
And
then what's interesting, though, Graham, is that this is all at the top end.
Brand. Well, yeah, that's because at the top end, the money's still there. And when you're charging huge ticket prices for a very large crowd, you can cover your costs then. It's the ones in the middle or at the bottom who are struggling, which is Britain all over, isn't it? it's
exactly replicating.
Place to be.
Absolutely, it's exactly replicating so much business structure across this country, and that would include shopping, of course. Small scale shops having to close in cities, as well as, ironically, as well as the big chains that have overstretched themselves, such as Wilko. But obviously, in the long term, the clear implication behind this: no small venues. Let's not be be less than dramatic in this. Will mean no new bands, no change in no chance for new bands to make progress. It becomes utterly impossible. And this complicated market, already further complicated by the fact they have to play gigs now, bands, to make money because of streaming taking over and therefore making far less money than they used to from record sales. So it's looking to me something of a perfect storm that's developing here, Graham.
You're right. And it's already happened to an extent, because if you watched the Brit Awards last night, you can see that none of the music that we like, none of the music that gets books written about it, none of the music that gets magazines printed about it, hardly any of the music that ends up in BBC Six Music, i.e. all the music that actually is of any cultural significance, apart from being entertainment, none of that music turned up in the Brit Awards.
No, none of it.
Chase and Status, who got an award for dance producers, which I'm not arguing with them getting the award, but what shocked me was when they flashed up their sort of resume of achievement.
Yeah.
And it turned out that Chase and Status have had more than 2 billion streams but their total combined album sales throughout their whole career is only 2.5 million. Now, 2.5 million does not a big major world music act make. And that tells you already that there's the streaming world, then there's the non-streaming world, and the two worlds are completely different. But the live music venue world lies in the physical format, musical world in general. And the bigger venues either lie in heritage acts or in the streaming world. Yeah. So it does make you think, well, what's the future now for medium to small size venues if the whole industry is now geared towards big streaming numbers and big money?
But ultimately, Graham, there will not be the new bands to come on to replace the bands. So when the Eagles, for example, who will play the new Manchester venue on their last tour, their farewell tour, is it Hell Freezes Over Yet Again tour? So I'm sure they've had previous farewell tours. But that's the kind of thing that's going to be happening. And you think, well, you know, how long can this go on? The Kinks are up to 60 years, etc. These acts will just die out, but they'll be milked for as long as possible.
Yeah, well, what I think should happen is you can't stop culture changing. It's very hard to stop an economic juggernaut in its tracks and turn direction as well. But what you can do is maximize the potential of the non-streaming world more, which is why I said on this podcast a couple of months ago that BBC Six Music should have its own charts. You need to create a buzz about the world that still cares about the end result, apart from just being entertainment and making money. You need to make more of an effort in that. I mean, the launched Record Store Day years and years ago, that seemed like a bit of an aberration, but I think that's the future for non-Brit Award type music. You need to maximize what you got. So you need to have charts based on a type of music, just like you used to have independent charts on the NME and sounds in the 1980s.
Nathan Clark is going to promote Yard Act in a big is it outdoor concert, I think they're going to play in? I'm assuming they're doing Millennium Square, are they? Is that where he's putting them on? Somewhere in Leeds?
I think they are, but I've seen them twice already, and although I like Yard Act a lot, I barely go to see any band more than twice in the space of a couple of years.
But what's happened there, obviously, is that they've played so many gigs on the smaller scale of Yard Act, and we're going to come on to Yard Act because they have released their second album just earlier on Friday, 2 days ago. But there's something where Nathan obviously helped Yard Act in their early days, putting on the gigs, and now actually is taking them to that next level. But at the moment, that scenario is pretty rare, what Nathan's been able to do there, that he's seen a Leeds band gaining gravity. Can he gain gravity? I don't mean that. Gaining momentum. And therefore, he's throwing them into that situation of playing a properly big gig in the city, which is good that that's happening. But again, you wonder how often actually now that model can exist, because that's still an ideal model. That's still the way it should be. Yeah,
but Yard Act's big problem will be in the future, because I'm presuming that they're not getting a huge wage out of it because they don't sell enough records to do that.
They've been losing money. They've been losing money, Yard Act. They've not been able to make a living.
The thing is, Yard Act are a success story. They're pretty big. They're as big as you can get to be without being big in the streaming world. But will they still be doing it in 10 years' time if they're not actually making much of a living? You know, I doubt it.
So right now, all the articles with them are about how they can't make a living.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I remember Field Music used to say the same thing in the days when they were nominated for the Mercury Prize. They just didn't make any money. Anyway, moving on to the second controversy that we sort of predicted. The Last Dinner Party, that great all-female five-piece, flouncy, skilled, passionate Queen born again as a 21st century band who've made it big quite quickly. And there's all those stories that we reported on about how they've been a manufactured band, which is complete baloney. Well, the latest big scandal, not a scandal, but controversy this week was reported in the Times when Will Hodgkinson, who's a very good music writer.
Yes, he is.
He seems to be a really nice chap. He accidentally blundered into criticising Last Dinner Party because he was writing about the demise of bands, guitar bands, that they're just not happening anymore. And I think in passing he mentioned Last Dinner Party, and he used a quote or two from an old interview, but he accidentally gave the impression that they were a posh band, and that part of the problem with the music industry nowadays is you have to be posh to be in bands because you need to have money behind you to actually survive. And it turns out he didn't actually mean that.
No.
It also turns out that the person who said it in the last dinner party isn't actually from a posh background. So Will accidentally got himself in trouble. But I think that totally misses the point anyway. That it isn't, you can't blame a band that's posh for the whole music industry being a bit posh. They've got as much right to be a band as anybody else. And in the days of the 60s, when you had Pink Floyd and Genesis, they were both posh bands. No one's going to say I can't
and
possibly
endless managers,
like
Graham, at
Pink
that
Floyd
time were
is so
posh. So many
Yeah,
managers were
exactly.
posh
So
at that time.
it's
Yeah.
a completely bogus argument. I don't mind anybody bring up the fact that it's hard for working class people now to get in culture because the money aspect is so bad and the support from the state is so bad now in the arts and culture world. That's a perfectly legitimate point to make. What you can't make is therefore anybody posh is the enemy. That's just completely ridiculous.
Entirely agree. And still, there's in the case of the last dinner party, there's nods to acts of the past, Queen and ABBA, but they're refreshing and vibrant, and they have originality to them as well. They have a confidence about them. There's a cheek about them. There's lots to really appreciate about them. The fact that there is an element of musical history there, but they're fresh.
Choruses.
And they met as students, and I don't see how that can possibly be a crime. That is not being manufactured. That is 5 people getting together as students and forming a band. A very familiar story for many bands across all the years of making pop and rock music.
Exactly right. So I say hurrah, the last dinner party.
Well, you probably wouldn't say hurrah, Graham, because that sounds very posh. Would you say?
Yes. Yes, indeed. Hooray! I say hooray.
Hooray. Not even that, I'm not so sure. Anyway, now Graham, we've touched on Yard Act, so let's reflect. I was going to suggest for a future edition. Okay, no, we're going to come back to Yard Act later anyway, as well as this, because I want to do the difficult second album, Yard Act, versus the, as titled, the easy 8th album by Kaiser Chiefs, just to look at 2 contrasting Leeds band. But we'll pick up on that one when we've listened to those. But you have, however, already heard Yard Act's new album and William Doyle's album, and you have long championed William Doyle's music, and looking like, as you say, so far, strong year for original albums. 2 new albums out this week. Introduce me to both of them, because I've yet to hear either, as I say.
The debut album was a big success, and it was a black and white sleeve, and it sounded post-punk without being copyist of like the Gang of Four.
Yeah.
And it was quite an austere album. You know, it was quite easy to like. Lots of ideas, great lyrics, lots of bounds, lots of hook lines, post-punky, but austere. The new one has a colour sleeve, and it's an artwork which is duplicated in the fold-out lyric sheet as well. And it looks like the sort of artwork that you got in parts of Kanye West's My Dark Twisted Fantasy album. It's quite colourful and quite sort of like slightly scary looking. And the album itself the cover reflects the contents of the album. They've gone from black and white to colour in their actual musical palette. They've suddenly discovered both funk and jazz, as well as hip hop. And the album throws everything at the wall and lets it slip down or stick. It has only 2 or 3 tracks that bear relation to the first album. The main one being We Make Hits, which is a really catchy track, and it's catchier than anything in the first album. It's an obvious like hit single if bands still had hit singles. And the rest, it goes wherever it wants to go. There's at least 3 lengthy tracks, which are mainly spoken word tracks with meandering, sort of like ambient textural backgrounds, not actually proper songs. A little bit like Jarvis on his Jarvis Cocker on his Jarvis album that came out in 2020. You know, very spoken word. And there's other tracks which are sort of like mutant funk with a surrealism, a sort of like stream of conscious surreal lyrics, mainly but not exclusively about James Smith's own life. Not as much surreal analysis of British society like the first one. So altogether, it's a much more self-indulgent in some ways album. And it's also an album which isn't guaranteed to please people who loved the debut album. But bizarrely, I think it's better than the debut album. It's not an album to put on at a party.
No.
Whereas the first one, you just bang it on, it's on the background, people like it, it's perfectly fun. This one is like, to actually enjoy the album a lot, you have to listen. It's not a background record in general. But I think it's actually a better album than the first album. So I'm quite impressed.
The that level of confidence that's there. I mean, they're a band actually that's been around a long time before releasing that first album, and maybe that's to advantage then when making a second one. That they first of all, they've got the confidence from the fact that they've been around a long time. The skill in music making has developed and developed and developed. But here, rather than what some bands tend to do, is just to play it a bit safe with the second album. Here, obviously, that they've done anything but that. They've done the unexpected, and I think that to be clearly a band should be praised for doing that. Also suggests that maybe a record label has not put pressure on them in that way, just to sort of do a doppelganger of the first album, but actually experimentation has been welcomed.
Yeah, well, they're on Island Records, which is part of Universal.
Yeah, so
the
major
whole
label
world is now part of Universal, and they seem to have thrown a bit of a they seem to have thrown a bit of a budget at Yard Act for this album last year. And in passing, when I said that, I thought the band was way better live than a year earlier. They'd really learned a lot.
Yeah.
I also said, whatever you do, please don't get normal. I said, I want to keep you the way you are, not totally mainstream. And he seems to have stuck to that, because this is only a mainstream album in the sense that spoken word is a mainstream thing now, so that ties into that thread. But it's way too tangential to even. It's not even as together as K Tempest is. It's a really artistic album. It's a real, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and it's going to go where it wants to go, and that's the end of the story. It's quite a brave album.
How might that now grow in a live performance then, Graham?
That's the strange thing. I think there's a dilemma coming for Yard Act, and I'm always keen to look ahead and predict things. But just like the Arctic Monkeys daren't play many tracks live from their last two albums because the fan base just doesn't want to hear them, Yard Act itself, they're in danger. If it wasn't for We Make Hits and maybe Dream Job, if it wasn't for that, for those two tracks, I'm not sure they could have a set that was dominated by the new album, because I'm not sure it would make for a lively gig, or that the fan base would love it. So I think their fans are quite hardcore that they've built up, and I think they'll remain loyal. But I don't know where they can go next with this and still have a career. And James Smith's lyrics are so honest about his own self-doubt. I am getting slightly worried about the band, whether it has a long-term future as a band, despite the fact I think this is a great album.
In terms of pulp albums, this would be the We Love You.
This is hardcore.
Or is it this is hardcore? Right, so it's the hardest of all the albums. This is hardcore. Yes.
It's the last, it's Pulp's last two albums. It's not Different Class. It's not His and Hers.
Not His and Hers. No.
It's a bit like that intro mini album of singles from before they got big, including Sheffield Sex City and Inside Susan, which sort of ramble along with Jarvis doing his spoken word thing, and they're brilliant. It's a bit like that, really.
Now, the other act that you've mentioned is William Doyle, and just remind listeners, William Doyle's just briefly on his past and then leading into being William Doyle.
Well, he seemed a youth 10 years ago, and his debut album, Told Strife Forever, and got a Mercury Prize nomination, and it was on a tiny label as well. And he's from Bournemouth. He's now 33, which means he was 20 at the time. And he was a very unusual would-be pop star, or even would-be indie star, because he dressed and thought like a 1920s English poet rather than an indie music star or a rock star. And his lyrics, his music was equally intelligent and a bit slightly off kilter and prone to mood swings. And that sort of got him some success, but not huge. And then he got signed to XL Records, but didn't get any big before. I think that's when I saw him live at Belgrave Music Hall in Leeds. And so he came back as himself as William Doyle. And this is his third album since he came back as himself, William Doyle. And he seems to have come back as his great influence and friend, because Brian Eno's been involved with two of his albums. He's like a 1970s Brian Eno album before Brian Eno went all ambient. There's little bits of ambient in there. There's a little bit of experimentation, but it's all very sort of pastoral, winsome, almost naive melodic pop. And he's been going towards that with his first two solo albums, which are both pretty good. Your Wilderness Revisited and Great Spans of Muddy Time. But the new one, Springs Eternal, is completely poppy. It's his most accessible album he's ever done. If you didn't know who he was, you could slap this on and go, "That's nice. That's a good album," which you couldn't do with really any of his previous albums.
No, no.
So it's a really impressive melodic album, and he's slightly fruity and florid, a bit like Eno was slightly fruity and florid in the 70s, and he's also fearless, like Eno was fearless. He does whatever he wants to do musically. He's very he's very loudly intelligent and poetic and intellectual, which makes him quite odd these days because he's not a spoken word guy. He doesn't talk like a Londoner. He's got no links to rap or hip hop or modern R&B. So he doesn't quite fit in that spoken word world, even though he's a poetic type figure. The only thing he hasn't got, which Brian Eno did have in the 70s, is he doesn't seem to have any darkness. Seems to be a very positive, light person on record, whereas there was always a weirdness about Eno, and even a slight darkness, especially in the 70s. And he doesn't seem to have that side whatsoever. So he rides along a sort of like on a cloud in the sky, being very emotionally open, but in an intellectual, poetic way. And so you end up, even though you enjoy it, sort of like struggling to grab it. It doesn't seem to have any substance to grab hold of.
I might make a strange comparison. Ian Brody, I suppose, of the Lightning Seeds.
Oh, yeah.
I make that comparison because of the positivity. Positivity is an interesting thing to have in a world that seems to be going to hell and further beyond hell. And I don't therefore have a problem with someone who actually goes against the tide in that way. I'm not saying art's got the responsibility to be hopeful. I'm not saying that you want plays to be hopeful. I'm not saying that films need to be hopeful. But I think often with music, it's a place that we do look for hope, partly because of the structure of songs being short and to the point often. And they lend themselves, therefore, to that. And part of the thing of a record becoming an earworm often actually does involve some form of positivity. Not always, but often that is the case.
It's almost like William Doyle, although this is his best album and mostly his best songwriting. It's almost like he doesn't exist in the same mortal plane as you and me. He's way up above us, and so with all great pop music, you like to have a heart you can connect to, and it's very hard to connect to William Doyle because he seems to be he's so poetic. He's not really grounded.
Like a new romantic, I mean, an old new romantic poet.
Well, no, it's a bit like you said. It's a bit like if Ian Brody Lightning Seeds had written the same sort of pop songs, but he had the perspective and intellect of a 1920s English poet. That's what you get William Doyle, and it'd be like Pure is. I mean, even Pure seems commercially obvious compared to William Doyle. William Doyle doesn't really do the obvious. His emotions aren't obvious. His thinking is not obvious. He has big melodies, but he doesn't ever maximize any chorus for a commercial reason. He's not trying to connect with you. He's really just being himself. Who's
going to listen to him apart from you?
Well, anybody who likes good pop tunes and who likes the idea that someone has got a interesting brain.
I mean, so he sounds to me the essence of a cult act. Yeah, well, I mean, it's good to have challenging and intelligent pop, Graham. I'm surely there's a place for that. But it does sound the absolute essence of a cult act.
I think you're right. William Doyle has enough talent to be a mainstream pop songwriter, a hit songwriter, but he has the temperament and the intellect of someone who should get an Arts Council grant as an almost living art installation. He should be supported by the state to do whatever he wants, and he should be able to perform inside art galleries like P.J. Harvey could do if she wanted to. He's that sort of bloke. He's an artist. He isn't, even though he can write pop tunes, he's not a pop star.
I mean, if you look at well, Divine Comedy, Neil Hannon, who has cult elements about him, but also completely knows how to collect and to connect. An intelligent writer, a witty writer, wonderful tunes, but it's not always easy to read at the same time. But obviously has commercial instincts more than someone like William Doyle. Is it almost an impossible position to take forever and a day? William Doyle's position, where commercial success is clearly never going to come his way in the way that we mentioned Lightning Seeds, I've mentioned Neil Hannon and Divine Comedy that have had that at the same time as both have plowed their own furrow in some ways.
Well, yeah, put it this way, William Doyle has clarinet on his new album. I mean, clarinet, that's not a rock and roll instrument, is it? Clarinet.
No.
But no, the thing is, he's shape-shifted musically quite a lot of times. He's gone from listening to William Doyle. He's done 5 or 6 albums. Each album's different. He's got quite a wide range of things he can do musically. So who's to say that I'm talking absolute rubbish and that in 3 or 4 years' time or 5 years' time, he doesn't find a new thing that presses his buttons, that he comes out with genuine passion about and suddenly crosses over more, in a vague fashion into the mainstream. I don't know. The guy's really talented, so he's not totally predictable.
How would someone pick up on William Doyle? I mean, I don't know whether much Six Music airplay. Not. I mean. Well, yeah. We've mentioned him quite a lot on this show. He's a particular favourite of yours, and I think it's good actually to highlight a talent like this. But I just wonder how someone like William Doyle gets greater and wider exposure.
Well, that's the whole conundrum of the modern music industry in Britain.
Yeah, exactly. That goes back to our first point.
When I ordered the album off Jumbo Records in Leeds, and they sent me a nice little letter with the album, they also invited me to the in-store live music session that William was going to do, but unfortunately I was already busy that night. So he has done a tour of independent record shops in Britain to promote the album. So there is a cottage industry around indie music now in Britain, linked to venues like the Broodnell and to record shops like Jumbo.
Yeah.
The trouble now is it's getting harder to make money out of that. That's the problem. But we've been here before, so let's not restate that. I would like to add there's 2 other albums that came out recently which are very good. Nadine Shah's 5th album, Filthy Underneath, is a very good album. She's a great female figure. And also a great album is a compilation by Bob Stanley of St. Etienne fame and Jason Wood called Fantastic Voyage, which is songs from the late 70s, so influenced by David Bowie's Low period, with stuff like Simple Minds and Thomas Lear and Sakamoto and the Walker Brothers. It's a mix of the obscure and the obvious, all with a theme that they're influenced by Low and Heroes albums. And it's a brilliant compilation. It's on Ace Records, Fantastic Voyage. And the only comparable figure to Bob Stanley that does compilations on Ace Records is John Savage, the music critic, whose compilations are always great. They're always themed. There's always an idea behind it. It's usually an idea that hasn't been explored much by anybody else.
And not Gary Crowley's ones, Graham. Not Gary Crowley's compilations.
Well, they're a little bit obvious. But so there's one track on Fantastic Voyage which I've never heard before called Ice Bar by a German band called Grauzone. And it sounds like LCD Sound System 20 years before they came along. And I can't help but think that James Murphy of LCD Sound System must have heard that track. It sounds so much like early LCD Sound System. And bizarrely, the compilation itself is like LCD Sound System's Losing My House track on their first album, where James Murphy recites all these cool, hip gigs he went to, which of course he didn't. He's just taking the mickey out of him being a cultural magpie and hipster, always knowing all the best bands first. And this compilation, exactly the compilation that James Murphy himself would have raved about if he wasn't now in a famous band and was starting off in the 1990s.
So, Graham, time for one interruption, I feel, at this point, if you wish.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of great things in Harrogate, or things that Harrogate linked to do with music. So, the brilliant Red House Originals Gallery run by Richard McTague, which has had people like Peter Blake and Pete McKee and Vic Reeves there in the past. Well, they've co-organised an event this Friday in London at Gibson Guitars Garage between the great music photographer Gerard Mankiewicz, and the brilliant soul singer P.P. Arnold.
P.P. Arnold,
And
yes.
they've organised it this in London at the Gibson Guitar Garage Shop, and they'll be in conversation. But the guest list is just off the chart. Who's actually turning up for this event? So,
Are you going?
Well, no, I haven't got the time or money to go to
No,
London.
I would like to point out, Graham, I would have been on that guest list. I was invited, like you were, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah,
but we're in
actually,
Ireland.
I was
That's my
invited.
excuse.
You're right.
But we were invited.
Wait a minute, I remember I was. What was I saying? Yeah. Anyway, that'll be fantastic. Also, Rooster's Tap Room. Roosters is the Harrogate-based independent craft beer brewery, which is fantastic. Yes. And its tap room has regular comedy shows and music shows. It's a great place in Harrogate. And they've got, coming up on Friday, March 15th, Chris Helm of the Seahorses, who, of course, we interviewed about a year ago on this very podcast. So that's just two Harrogate things, which are cool events, thus proving that Harrogate is nowhere near as boring as everybody else thinks, or Harrogate itself thinks.
Exactly. And with comedy, it puts the ha-ha into Harrogate. There we go. Yeah. Now, Graham, I this week went to see Emma Rice's company, Wise Children. Just to remind listeners, Emma Rice was the founder of Knee High Theatre in Cornwall, one of the most influential theatre companies of recent times. And Emma went on to be taken on at Shakespeare's Globe, headhunted, as it were, for the role there. And then they've suddenly just chickened out on her at some, who knows, didn't work out, sadly. But she has made a fantastic return with Wise Children. I think they're up to maybe their 5th production, based initially in Bristol, and they've just taken over a Methodist church in Frome, I think. Frome, I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. When in Frome, do as the Fromans do. Anyway, so, but this is a touring company, and in this case, working a combination of Birmingham Rep is involved, York Theatre Royal is involved, Home in Manchester is involved, and this, therefore, you've got across the country significant companies working in tandem with Emma Rice's company, and the production is called Bluebeard, and based on a fairy tale, and a fairy tale that Emma had always avoided because she felt that it was about the controlling of women. It was just a tale that she did not like. And suddenly, though, driven by a combination of the incidents of attacks on women and the prevalence of this, and she was, as it were, just kept nagging at her and finally said, I'm going to address Bluebeard. I'm going to look at it in a different way. And she's created a new form of fairy tale that she calls a wonder tale. You could call it a revenger's tragicomedy. You could call it...
What does wonder tale mean?
What does a wonder tale mean? I think the wonder tale, it's still rooted in fantasy, but at the same time, reality plays through the fantasy. And that's what keeps happening in this piece. There is still elements of fantasy and timelessness about it, but at the same time, we're in pressing times where change needs to happen. And interestingly, the press night coincided with a report by Eilish Angiolioni on Wayne Couzens and the Metropolitan Police officer who killed Sarah Everard. And so for the press night to actually fall on the day that that report came out and was so damning, the fact that the police culture could allow him to be doing what he did for so long in the police. So there is anger in this piece of theatre. Absolutely there is. What I think makes her, Emma, a remarkable theatre maker is that she is able to walk the tightrope in which you have comedy and utter darkness, and handles it with complete confidence of touch in the way to judge how you progress that within a piece of theatre. It's a piece of theatre that has elements of cabaret. It's a piece of theatre that has some modern technology in it, in the use of visuals. It's a piece that has at its heart wonderful and strongly combined performances with individual flair within it. It is exhilarating from start to finish to watch her work. in her interview, she said it certainly won't be boring, and that's exactly what her work is never going to be. Never boring,
So
always
what's the
stimulating.
cast? How big's the cast?
So
I don't mean how
not a
tall they are. I
large
mean how
cast,
many.
not a
Hmm.
large cast,
So
and
is it
they're
quite an
acting.
intimate production then? Does it feel intimate?
Well, it has an epic timelessness about it, as well as being. You,
Mm,
I wouldn't call it intimate pieces, but you have character studies within it, so
mm,
it has that element of concentration about it. But if you like, it's actually the way the words have their impact is on the grand scale. She
mm.
makes words dance, and she makes words fizz with life, and I think she's got a poetic ear combined with an utter sense of what is visually impactful. Rob Orton, the comedian from York, talks of making work that has poetic power in its words, but at the same time makes you paint the words in you paint words, you paint through words, you paint pictures through words. And Rob, as a comedian, had worked in graphic design and then in advertising, where his thinking was probably too left field for the advertising world. But what is so striking is when you have really powerful. The visual is so strong in the work of Bluebeard, but at the same time, so is the language. And there is a playful element, there's a mischievous element, and yet the darkness at which this piece leads to is
So
extraordinary and shocking.
is it this sort of play where you go through a range of emotions as you're watching it? One minute you're
Yes,
entertained, next minute you're worried, one minute you're
yes,
laughing, next minute you're slightly disturbed,
yes,
and one minute
yes,
you're being intellectual, next minute you feel quite emotional.
yeah.
Hmm. Sounds
Emotion.
fantastic.
It's extraordinary. I mean, as you and I have seen theatre shows over so many years. I've always banged on about Emma's work, and
Mm.
constantly, she still can surprise and exhilarate to me like no other theatre maker that I go and see. For the broad range of what she gets into theatre and why she makes theatre so vital still, and a force for a future, not something that some people think, oh, it's an art
Charles,
form that was completely
before
outplayed by
this
the world of
episode
film.
before this episode ends, perhaps you should try and invite her on to be a guest at some point.
Well, yeah, I've never had Emma on as a guest. I do like the idea of doing that, and I can contact her
Mm.
for that point, because I do think, I mean, she sent out or Wise Children sent out a syndicated interview piece with her that was so
Mm.
complete, so thorough in everything she said in it. I ended up not needing to interview her for
Mm-hmm.
because it was so
Yeah, I know what
complete
you
what
mean.
she'd written.
Yeah,
There was nothing
yeah,
else
yeah,
I could add
yeah.
to it.
That's also
So
quite annoying for a journalist where you've got nothing to add.
I had to hold my hands up and think, do you know what? She's answered every single
Yeah.
question I could have thought about for this piece. And what's interesting is that everything that was said in that interview to me was delivered in the performance. Now, this it was recorded on a Sunday night. It's always unpredictable quite when we get this up online to listen to. But if
Mm.
it goes up before March the 9th, I really cannot recommend sufficiently going to see Bluebeard, York Theatre Royal. As I say, finishes on March the 9th. Please try to see it. If you can't see it in Leeds, well worth travelling for wherever it's going else on
Or
the
you can
tour.
always watch it on catch up, obviously.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.